a moment in every era of basketball when someone crosses a line. Not a foul line, not the half-court line, a different kind of line. The line that says this is how far you're allowed to go. The Detroit Pistons didn't just cross that line, they built a dynasty on the other side of it. And the NBA? The NBA had to rewrite the rulebook just to drag them back. In the late 1980s, the Detroit Pistons became the most feared team in the history of professional basketball. They were led by point guard Isaiah Thomas, a 6'1" smiling assassin who would fight anyone on the floor regardless of size. They had Bill Laimbeer, a center who turned provocation into an art form. Joe Dumars, the quiet one, the one Michael Jordan actually respected, the one who made Jordan's life miserable anyway. And Dennis Rodman, who played every possession like it was the last possession of his life. Together, they built a system so physical, so suffocating, so strategically brutal that it didn't just win championships. It broke the most talented player on the planet for 3 straight years. This is the story of how one team from the streets of Detroit pushed the NBA to its absolute limits. How they invented a defensive strategy so ruthless it's still talked about in locker rooms today. How they made Michael Jordan go home in the summer, twice, and completely reinvent himself just to survive them. And how, when the dust settled, the NBA commissioner himself admitted they should have done more to stop them sooner. This is the Bad Boys. Before we get to the Jordan rules, before we get to the championships, before we get to the moment the NBA changed its rules because of one team, we have to understand where this all started. And it started with Detroit. Detroit in the 1980s was a city grinding through hard times. The auto industry was collapsing. Unemployment was brutal. The city was fighting for its identity, and the Pistons reflected that city perfectly. Not flashy, not glamorous, not built for highlight reels, built to work, built to fight, built to refuse to lose. The NBA at that time was a different world. Magic Johnson and the Showtime Lakers were putting on a spectacle every single night on the West Coast. Fast breaks, no-look passes, crowds going wild. On the East Coast, Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics were dismantling opponents with precision and arrogance. Magic, Bird, Showtime. The league was in love with beauty. And then there was Detroit. Chuck Daly took over as head coach in 1983, and he saw something nobody else was paying attention to. Not skill, not speed, not finesse, toughness. A roster full of players who didn't care if you liked them, who didn't care if the game looked pretty, who had something to prove. Not to the league, not to the media, but to each other. So Daly leaned into it. He built a culture of controlled aggression. He made defense not just a strategy, but an identity, a point of pride, a statement about who these men were. And the city of Detroit, the workers, the grinders, the people who built their lives with their hands, they didn't just support this team, they became this team. The Pistons were about to become something the NBA had never seen before. So how do you take a collection of players and turn them into the most feared group in the sport? You give them an identity that nobody else is willing to claim. The name came almost by accident. The team put out a season highlight tape called Bad Boys, a nod to the 1983 movie. And instead of laughing it off, the players embraced it. Joe Dumars said it simply, "You can't be great in this league and have zero identity." And once they had that identity, something shifted. Isaiah Thomas was the engine. 6'1" with a smile that could charm you and a competitiveness that could scare you. He was the one who quarterbacked not just the offense, but the culture of this team. He wasn't afraid of anyone. He never backed down. And he expected, he demanded, the same from every man in that locker room. Then there was Bill Laimbeer. Laimbeer didn't just defend, he provoked. He got into people's heads, he flopped, he talked, he stared. He'd elbow you and then look at the referee like he was the victim. He was the most hated player in the league, and he was fine with that. He understood that if you hated him, you were thinking about him instead of thinking about winning. Rick Mahorn, who the other Pistons actually called the real enforcer, was the kind of big man that made opponents genuinely hesitant to drive into the paint. Vinnie Johnson came off the bench like a blowtorch, heating up instantly, hitting shots when nobody else could. And Dennis Rodman, still in his early days, still raw, was already becoming something otherworldly on defense and the glass. Together, these men built a system around one principle: make every single possession uncomfortable. Make teams feel like every drive to the basket has a consequence. Make them feel the game slipping away from them. Not just on the scoreboard, but physically. In their bodies, in their minds, and once they perfected it, not even the greatest player alive could escape it. Now we get to the part of the story that defined this era. Because by the late 1980s, Michael Jordan had arrived, and he hadn't just arrived, he had taken over. In April of 1988, Jordan dropped 59 points on the Detroit Pistons in a single game. 59. Chuck Daly watched it happen and knew something had to change immediately. Because if Michael Jordan was left to operate freely, they were going to lose. Period. So Daly and his assistants went to work on something that had never been done in the NBA before. A defensive system designed for one specific player. They called it the Jordan Rules. The rules were detailed, precise, calculated. If Jordan had the ball at the top of the key, force him left, double him immediately. If he had it on the left wing, double from the top right away. If he had it on the right wing, slow double team, make him wait for it, take away his rhythm. If he caught it on the block, hit him with a big man double team. And then, the most important rule of all. Chuck Daly described it in his own words. Anytime he went by you, you had to nail him. If he was coming off a screen, nail him. Now, Jordan was still getting his points. Let's be clear about that. Against the Pistons in those playoff series, he averaged 27, then nearly 30, then 32 points per game. But here's what the numbers don't tell you. His efficiency was down, his rhythm was disrupted. And at the end of close games, when it mattered most, the accumulated punishment was taking its toll. Dennis Rodman admitted it publicly years later. He said Chuck Daly's actual instruction was simple. Every time he comes into the lane, put his ass on the floor. And then Rodman said something that tells you everything about this era. Thank God we could hit people then. The Pistons beat Jordan's Bulls in the 1988 playoffs, 4-1. They beat them again in 1989. They beat them again in 1990, 7 games. Jordan averaging 32 points a night and still going home without a ring. 3 straight years. 3 straight times the most talented player on earth went toe-to-toe with the bad boys Pistons, and 3 straight times he went home. But here's what gets lost in the Jordan story. The Pistons weren't just a great defensive team, they were a great basketball team. In the 1988-89 season, Detroit won 63 games, shattering their own franchise record. They moved to their brand new arena, the Palace of Auburn Hills, the first NBA facility built entirely with private funds. And they played like men who owned the building. That year, they went to the finals and swept the Los Angeles Lakers. Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the whole Showtime operation, in 4 straight games. Joe Dumars was named Finals MVP. The city of Detroit went absolutely wild. And in 1990, they did it again. This time beating the Portland Trail Blazers in 5 games. Isaiah Thomas won Finals MVP. And in a moment that still gives Detroit fans chills, it was Vinnie Johnson who sealed it, sinking a 15-foot jumper with 0.7 seconds left on the clock to win the championship. The microwave, ice in his veins, back-to-back champions, and they did it their way. Slow, physical, methodical, relentless. No flash, no Showtime, just Detroit basketball. For a brief, extraordinary moment in NBA history, and the most feared team in basketball was also simply the best team in basketball. But every dynasty ends, and the way the Bad Boys era ended says everything about who they were. By 1991, Michael Jordan had transformed himself. He'd spent an entire offseason in the weight room, bulking up to withstand the physical punishment. He and Phil Jackson had installed the triangle offense, a system built around movement and spacing that made the Jordan rules infinitely harder to execute. Instead of constantly driving into a wall of Pistons defenders, Jordan found ways to get his shots without giving Detroit a target. In the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls swept the Pistons, 4-0. And then came the moment that defined the Bad Boys as much as any championship. In the final seconds of Game 4, with the outcome no longer in doubt, the Pistons walked off the court. They didn't shake hands. They didn't congratulate the Bulls. They just walked straight to the locker room, heads down, while the final seconds ticked away. To this day, people debate that moment. Michael Jordan had said in a pre-game interview that the Pistons are undeserving champions. The Bad Boys are bad for basketball. And so the Bad Boys didn't give him the handshake. They didn't give him the moment. They gave him nothing. Some people call it classless. Others call it the most Detroit thing that has ever happened. Either way, the era was over. Here's where history gets interesting, because the Bad Boys didn't just lose to the Bulls, they forced the entire NBA to respond to them, while they were still winning. Think about what the league was watching during that run. Games were getting more physical. Hard fouls were becoming routine. Players were being knocked to the floor on routine drives, and the penalty for it was barely a slap on the wrist. Just 2 free throws. There was no flagrant foul rule that meant anything. There was no real deterrent. The Pistons had done the math. They figured out that the cost of their physicality was lower than the benefit. And they were right. So right before the 1990-91 season, as the Bad Boys were still reigning champions, the NBA increased the penalty for flagrant fouls to 2 free throws and possession of the ball. It was a direct response to the Bad Boys era. The league admitted it. David Stern, the NBA commissioner at the time, later said, "If I had it to do over again, we would have been more aggressive in regulating that style of play." The changes didn't stop there. Hand-checking restrictions tightened. Protections for offensive players expanded. Over the following years, the league systematically dismantled the conditions that had allowed the Bad Boys style to thrive. The Pistons didn't just beat teams. They beat teams so effectively, so completely, so ruthlessly within the rules that the league had to change the rules themselves just to prevent anyone from doing it again. Name another team in sports history that can say that. Here's what people get wrong about the Bad Boys Pistons. They think the legacy is the Jordan rules, or the walk-off, or the championships. Those things matter, but they're not the legacy. The real legacy is what they forced everyone else to become. To beat the Pistons, the Bulls had to transform themselves. They traded for Bill Cartwright. Jordan spent an entire offseason in the weight room. They installed a completely new offensive system. The Bulls that beat the Pistons in 1991 were built specifically to survive Detroit. And then the Bulls that came after that, the team that won 6 titles, carried some of the Pistons' DNA in them. That toughness, that refusal to be physically dominated. The Knicks, under Pat Riley, tried to copy the Jordan rules from 1992 to 1998. Every defensive coordinator in the NBA since then has studied what Chuck Daly built. Every physical playoff series you've ever watched traces something back to Detroit. Michael Jordan himself, perhaps the most telling tribute of all, once said, "I hated them." And that hate carries even to this day. Not a rival, not an obstacle, not a tough opponent. Hated. That is the mark of a team that got inside your head and lived there. The Bad Boys Pistons didn't just win championships, they changed what it meant to compete. Close your eyes and picture Detroit in 1989. A city that had been knocked down, written off, left behind. A team that the league didn't like, that the commissioner didn't like, that Michael Jordan publicly hated. A team that wore the villain's jersey and wore it proudly. They didn't have Showtime. They didn't have Magic's smile or Bird's cool. They had Isaiah's fire, Lambier's edge, Rodman's madness, Dumar's dignity, and Chuck Daly's genius. They took a city that was fighting for its identity and gave it 2 championship banners. They took the most gifted player in the world and sent him home 3 years in a row. They played the game so hard, so smart, so ruthlessly within the rules, that the rules had to change. They didn't beat their opponents. They beat the system, and when the system couldn't beat them back fair and square, it changed the rules. That's not a villainous legacy. That's the legacy of a team that was simply too good to be stopped any other way. And one more thing. The current Detroit Pistons just recorded the worst single-season loss record in NBA history in 2024. But they hold the #1 overall pick. Detroit is rebuilding. And if history tells us anything about this city, when Detroit comes back, they don't come back soft.